So yeah, we're started. We'll wait for the attendees to click upwards a bit here, and then we'll get Dwayne started after that.
Cool.
Where are your pictures of your kids, Shawn? I haven't seen any pictures of your kids since, I don't know how long. Since the first one stomped over the office table or something.
Yeah, that's yeah, Soren's in college. He's going to UW. It's great. Kale's a high school dropout, but he's made millions as a hedge fund guy. So who knows?
I'm not that far to date how old they are. I have a better clue than that. I believe Soren's more like 5.
He is. He's turned 6 this year.
Hale isn't even a year old yet, is he?
Okay, Soren literally said right before this, he said, he said, I only love video games in this world. And Krista and I were like, what did you say?
Oh, did you hear the new one? My bosses were lying to me. Apparently, George Martin signed some deal to work on some video game thing, and Brandon Sanderson ranted, "Why didn't they hire me? I know a lot more about video games than he does. I would have written the piece. It'd been great." Blah 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 blah.
Dwayne, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okay. Okay. Good evening. Welcome everybody. I'm Dwayne. I'm the science fiction fantasy buyer for the University Bookstore here in Seattle. Tonight we are having author Shawn Speakman for his new book, The Tempered Steel of Antiquity Gray. See if we can actually make that readable. His what's his 4th book? I've lost track.
Yeah.
Anyway, brand new science fiction novel. We've had a few issues getting it ready, but now it's officially out. It's for sale. And tonight Shawn will be in conversation with Terry Brooks. Terry Brooks, of course, being the world famous author of the Shannara Chronicles, the Magic King for Sale books, writing books, you name it. And of course, his newest book, Child of Light, which came out earlier this year. I think we still have a few signed copies of that floating around, as well as some signed copies of your newest collection. Of course, Shawn, just to go briefly into Shawn's background, in between being a father and a husband and a publisher in his spare time, is now also writing novels. And before, of course, he was also a bookseller. How he juggles this all in his time, I don't know. I think he just doesn't have any sleep in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But I'm
How
going
it
to let you
feels
guys.
sometimes.
I will remind you folks that the book is available for order from the University Bookstore. We will have signed copies in a couple of days. Feel free to place an order or come in and get one in about 2 or 3 days. Shawn, Terry, why don't you guys take it away?
So Shawn, since I'm the the interviewer tonight, I'll start with a few questions. One is that you have tackled more than a few projects over the last few years. It's a bit scary how thin you've spread yourself. Are you starting to feel the pressure yet?
That's a really, really good question, and I'll be sure to ask my therapist about that. You know, this was one of the things that I was always worried about on some level. I think you know, when you start off in a career in writing, you have your day job, right? And you have to have your day job just to be able to pay your bills and buy your food and all that fun stuff. And I always knew that it was going to be difficult having a day job and then trying to writing gig. But it's funny how everything that I've managed to do in the last 10 years has really been built upon one another. So it's all fun, which is great, but yeah, I'm starting to feel spread a little thin now. I mean, I run the signed page still, but I did hire my first employee for the signed page, Sydney, and she's great at it. So I am no longer shipping books, which is a huge time saver. Grim Oak Press, I have my business partner, Becky Lawson, who helps handle a lot of that stuff, which is great. So we have a very good working relationship with that. And then when it comes to family and kids and all that, I'm more than happy to be spread thin while I'm playing with my kids or having a date night with my wife. So it hasn't gotten to the breaking point yet, but I can definitely feel it. I think I'm kind of where I need to be at the moment, and I'm not going to put much more on my plate. Let's put it that way.
I think every time I hear you talk about where you are and what you've been doing and attempt to define it in some way, it comes out sounding more and more like a pyramid scheme.
Well,
you wouldn't plead guilty to that, would you?
You got to get to the top somehow, Terry, and what better way than a pyramid? No, I think I deliver on everything that I promise. So
Yeah.
yeah, no pyramid scheme.
Are you starting to think about backing off of any of these things, or do you really think, I mean, you're a young man, so you could probably handle all of them, especially if you get a little help here and there.
Yeah, I had a moment several days ago. It was actually over the weekend where my son Soren, who's 5 years old, said, "Dad, I don't like how much you work." And talk about an important criticism coming from somebody that I know is completely honest and truthful in every single way. A 5-year-old will always tell you exactly what they're thinking, no matter if it's the right thing to say or not. So the last 5 days or so, I have stopped work like at 4 o'clock, right when he gets home from school, and I don't work the rest of the evening. But what that means is that instead of just drinking my coffee and relaxing in the morning, I am doing emails when I'm drinking my coffee now. So the last 4 days I've been drinking my coffee and doing my emails at the same time. So I don't think I'm going to be backing off of anything necessarily. I do have too many writing projects. I'm sure that you know what that feels like when you have too much going at once.
Yeah.
That is something that I have to be very regimented on when it comes to my time management. I need to get through these projects. I need to write every single day. I need to write a good amount of words every day so I can kind of get caught up. It's one of those things where I've written first books of series and I haven't written a sequel yet, technically. So two of the books are standalone, which is good for readers. So Darkthorn is a standalone, and even Antiquity Gray is kind of a standalone. But I owe sequels to people, so I have to keep writing every single day. So I can't back off that, that's for sure.
I want you to keep in mind that this old and weathered writer gave himself permission at the age of about, oh, I don't know, I won't give you an age, but a while back, not too far, gave himself permission to quit every day between 3 and 4 and to just read. And it was one of the better decisions because, number one, you don't get a lot of reading done if you don't give yourself time to do the reading and you start struggling with guilt. And the second thing is that it frees your mind up in amazing ways. And I sometimes forget how much I love to read until I get back into it in a serious sort of way.
Yeah, I originally my idea for a while, I was stopping at 4 o'clock and I was reading. I would stop at 4 with my work and I would read. And yeah, it was one of those things where every day that it happened, I would literally get out of my chair and be like reinvigorated, like be invigorated from what I was reading. And then, you know, Soren got into school and that kind of changed things a little bit. He gets home at 4 and he wants to see me and he wants to hang out and play and stuff. So now actually in the last, I'd say last 4 months or 5 months, I've been reading right before bed, which of course I'm exhausted from the kids by the time that happens. So I'm literally reading a chapter a night of a book. So it's taken me, you know, 20 days to finish a book, whereas back in the past, it would take me 4 or 5 days. So yeah, there's important things that you need to do to feed yourself as a writer. I've learned a lot of those from you over the 2 decades we've known one another. And yeah, I think I have found a good place right now when it comes to my work-life balance. So
well, I think we need to stop here and move over to the subject of Antiquity Gray.
Okay.
You know, I'm tempted to ask you to tell everybody something about the book they probably don't know. If you can think of something like that, you know, a little hint of this, that, and the other thing. But in the absence of that, I'd just like you to talk a little bit about this book and why you wrote it and that sort of thing. Because that's what I always want to hear from writers is, why did you pick this stupid book? I mean, why did you pick this particular book to write?
Sometimes I think that about my books too. God, why did I write this stupid thing? I'm in the middle of working on a project right now where I'm in the middle of it. I'm in the middle of this book, or at least long novella. And I'm at that point now in my writing where I'm like, this sucks. What am I doing?
Well, you have to have that happen at least once during the course of writing a book where you know that this is absolutely the worst thing you've ever written. Your career is over. Your
Yeah.
wife will divorce you next week. The kids will leave home and go live in, in strangers' homes before they will be associated with this book that you've written.
That's right.
I think it's how it's a kind of a gut check moment when you have that happen, but you get used to it after a while, I think, because there's always those times that you are second guessing yourself.
Yeah, this will be the fifth really long thing that I've written, and so I've just come to understand that that's a part of the process. And a lot of my writing friends, especially online, every time they get to that middle point, they know. But when it comes to Antiquity, it honestly shouldn't exist. There's no other way to put it. I am Brooksian in my approach to writing. I think I've learned a lot from you, listening to you. I started reading you very young. I was 13 when I started reading, so in those formative years. And I absorbed a lot of that. And so I'm fantasy through and through. And I always thought I would be fantasy through and through till the end. And then I got an email, I got a Facebook message from Joe Martin, who is an editor, and he was putting together a mech anthology, a robot anthology. And he asked me if I'd want to write a short story for it. And I was literally right in the middle of responding to him, like, why the hell did you write me? Like, I write fantasy. Don't you know that? Don't you know who I am? No, that kind of thing. And right when I was about ready to send it to him, I just had that flash of just one little thing. And every book, every short story, it's a different type of flash. But this one was a young girl on the sands of her desert planet with a floating soccer ball as her robot companion, and them finding a large hand in the desert. And I literally deleted the message I was writing back to Joe. I deleted it and I just said, I just had an idea. What do you think about this? And I didn't know anything about the story. I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't know anything. It was just the initial lightning bolt that hit me. And he said, great, run with it, write me it. So I did. And I loved it. It was really fun for me. It felt very science fantasy, Star Warsian, a little Dune-ish. Those of you who read Terry's work, Armageddon's Children, I felt like that was kind of the niche that the initial part of this story kind of grew out of. And I liked it a lot. And I gave it to my mom. And my mom read it and she said, I loved this. This is the best thing you've written so far. I want more. And so I turned in the short story. It got edited. It was published in Mech Age of Steel. So those of you who are wanting, those of you who are completists that want to know the initial seed of all of this, it was in Mech Age of Steel. And then my mom passed away. And, the last thing that she read was Antiquity Gray. And Antiquity's story just wouldn't leave me alone. I don't know if it had to do with my mom. I don't know if it was just the muse or just my own proclivity of wanting to know more about this particular character, but I really, really wanted to write more. And so I did. And I kind of did what you did on Armageddon's Children. Actually, I did a little bit like you did. I wanted to test it out. I was like, well, I don't know where this is going. So I'm just going to write the next 2 chapters. And I'm just going to kind of see where it goes and see what kind of percolates in my mind as I'm writing that. And by the time I finished writing those next 2 chapters, the whole rest of the book had planned itself in my mind. So that's how that book came to be. And it really shouldn't exist in a way, because I am a fantasy writer, but I did throw enough fantasy in there for it to, I think, resonate with my readers, that I've had from the Darkthorn and from Song of the Fellhammer. And people seem to like it. So I'm happy with that. I can't be sad about that.
I think it's important that you said, excuse me, just a little COVID. No, I'm kidding. I think it's important that you said that you wrote a couple chapters to see where it would go, and then you just went from there. And I think that's basically what we do anyway, most of the time, is that rather than working from a structured format, we're working from at least maybe a partially structured format, but there's a lot of space and so forth to be creative as we go. And reinvent the ideas that you started with, because that's how our minds work. And unless you write a lot faster than I do, which I don't think you do, you are always thinking better, better ideas on the nuances of what you're trying to put together. And I think you, as a writer, you need to allow yourself that time. So good on you.
I still do. I have, your writing guide, Sometimes the Magic Works, really straightened me out. Oh my gosh, was that 2003 or 2004 when it came to my own writing? And it wasn't so much that it was the outline piece to it, although I did heavily outline my first 2 books. I outlined heavily. I had, spreadsheets of outline to guide me. But I trust the process more now. And I have a loose idea of where I'm going with something, but I don't know exactly. And the novella I'm writing, the long novella I'm writing right now, is very it's very organic. I didn't put down a single outline. So I am taking it step by step, and I'm hoping that I don't, write myself into a corner somewhere and have to get out, because I think that'd be too stressful for the life I live. I don't think I could take that kind of stress. So yeah, so if there's any writers out there, there are numerous ways to do all of this. And I've even changed in the last 10 years or 15 years, I should say 15 years I've been writing. Even I've changed my process in that time. So
I think that, a lot of people don't understand that a writer's life changes like everything else does. And that what works for you at the age of 40 might not work for you at the age of 50 or 60. And this has to do with your physical presence, your physical inhibition, your physical limitations. It has to do with how your mind works. But you shift time periods, you have to allow for a family and everything. So all those things have to be taken into account. And it's one thing to do it when you're all alone, nobody's living with you. But if you choose to actually be friendly to others and do acquire a spouse or a partner, and maybe even pick up a couple children from somewhere or other, then you have to deal with what all that means, because they're not going to just sit around and watch you write.
Right.
They're going to want your participation in their lives. And we just talked about this a minute ago with Soren. So I learned that a long time ago, and started out writing at nights, and then eventually gravitated to my elder years of writing, where I only write early in the morning when there's nothing around and nobody's up and nobody bothers you. So I think that people do get the wrong idea that, once you start doing this, if you're successful, then you're all settled. Nothing ever changes, but it really does.
yeah, it does change. I mean, I'm just going to plug the last blog post that you wrote on your website. Any of you that have not read this blog post from Terry that he wrote a couple of days ago on his website, it's quite a piece to read, because it is a good reminder that nothing is static in this. Things change. Sometimes things don't go the way you plan, and you have to be able to roll with that. When it comes to my writing, I mean, I used to write late at night also, and now I write when the 5-year-old goes to school. So I get a solid from 8 o'clock in the morning until about 11:30 or 12, and then lunchtime is kind of when I stop, and then I shift gears in the afternoon and do all the business stuff that I have to do, the Grim Oak stuff, the taxes, the signed page stuff, getting new signings going, all the emails, all that stuff. So, yeah.
So what do you think about the few, you said that you view, at the moment at least, Antiquity Gray as a solitary book, but we've also talked about the fact that you might carry this story on for a ways. And yeah. I don't think you've decided yet even how far you might carry it on.
Yeah.
The potential for it going on 2, 3, 4 books is there if you chose to do so.
Yeah.
So is this percolating around in your?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I've known the ending of the second book from the moment I finished the first one.
That's good.
So I see some people in here going, no, Antiquity must have more books in the story. It's not a standalone book, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm reading you guys. I hear you. The first book has a pretty good literary ending, I think. But yes, there is more there. It's kind of like The Matrix. The Matrix could have ended with that first movie, but there is more story to be told. And I know I definitely know the first 5 or 6 chapters of the second book. I know some tent poles along the way, and I know the last scene of that book. And it, hopefully, if I do it right, it'll be a gut punch. It'll be an Empire Strikes Back type of, oh my gosh, what did he just do? And then, yeah, the third book, I have little bits and pieces of the third book already running around. I think when I write the second book, it'll inform more about that third book. I'm at the very end of writing the sequel to The Dark Thorn right now, and I'm really amazed at how writing the sequel has changed what I thought I was going to do in the third book of that series. So you never know until you're in the middle of writing it where you're actually going to go with some of these things.
And then you turn it into your editor, and they explain to you why you missed the target, and you have to try doing something a little different.
Right. Well, you know, so you're one of your former editors, Betsy Mitchell, who I adore, who you adore. We love her to death. She's a phenomenal editor and person.
Yep.
She's my editor now, so she edits my work, and so now I've gotten a taste of what it's like that you had to live with for, you know, over 10 years. I think she was your editor. And it's always with good reason. There's always a good reason there. It's always with, you know, the intention of making the book stronger. And she made Antiquity Gray stronger.
Yeah.
She had me add a couple scenes. She had me remove a scene. She had me tighten some things up, expand in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
Very fortunate that Antiquity was edited by one of the best editors that we've had in the last 50 years, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, are you looking at other projects at this point, or are you full up enough that you don't need to look at any other projects? Or
yeah, you know, I kind of have the same problem you have. Not enough time.
You're
right?
old.
Well, yeah, well, I've had cancer twice. I've had cancer twice. I feel like I'm 70, but no. Yeah, what I'm writing right now is a lot of fun. It's an extension, it's an addition to the Grimdark novella that I turned into Grimdark magazine for their anthology, The King Must Fall.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another situation where I wrote this short story for an anthology, and it just wouldn't leave me alone. And I decided, you know what, this needs to be expanded out a bit. So while I'm working on the Everwinter Wraith a little bit, I'm trying to write several hundred words in Everwinter Wraith every day. My main focus is on the King Killing Queen, which is this kind of darker story. It still has familiar trappings that fantasy readers will love, but and I'm having a lot of fun with it. That's the important thing. I look forward to writing from the point of view of the main character. She's a lot of fun. So, so yeah. So I'm going to finish that up, and I'll be finishing the Everwinter Wraith, the sequel to the Dark Thorn, right after that. And then after that, I'm going to go into Antiquity Gray and write the sequel for Antiquity Gray. I have a feeling that I'm going to have a lot of people saying, you know, I really want to know more. I mean, I've already seen it in the chat here, so
yeah.
I think that's a good thing. And so I have to, the good thing about Antiquity is, like I said, I kind of know where I'm going with the story. There won't be, you know, any late deliveries on this one. I know what I want to do with it. So that will be what I'm writing. Probably, I will start writing that at the end of this year. I would imagine sometime October, November, maybe a little earlier than that. We'll see. I don't have a whole lot left to finish up on the Everwinter Wraith, and I'm happy about that. And I love how it's come together. So, you know, those of you who haven't read The Dark Thorn, that book's out there. You can read it now. I think it's very urban fantasy. So if you like urban fantasy, like Word and Void or Jim Butcher's work or anything like that, yeah. Should we take a question here? I see there's 2 questions in our Q&A. Let's see. For Terry and Shawn, do you feel like I'm going to ask you this question. I'm tired of being interrogated.
Hey, this isn't my show.
You didn't know what you signed up for.
Well, I'll give a quick answer and then you can expand.
Oh, okay. For Terry and Shawn, do you feel like you have your work in the back of your head and just need to spend the time to put it on paper, or do you have to sit and think about what comes next in the story series?
Well, sitting and thinking doesn't work well for me anymore. Thinking in general is sort of a struggle. But yeah, you know, I think we have to cogitate about what we're doing all the time. And it's one of the things I like to talk about is that you can never leave the office because the office is right up here. And you can be thinking about what you're writing at any given point in your life. Even if you're at a wild and crazy party of some sort, you can be thinking about what you're working on. And frequently you can't even shut it off.
Right.
So I think there's that ongoing percolation of storytelling that you're engaged in, and sometimes of things that you're not engaged in, but that's just the way your brain works. So yeah, what do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I'll add on to it too with an example. When I decided to continue this this short story and make it into a long novella or short novel, I didn't know exactly where it was going to go. I had an idea, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. And I just happened to be driving. I was going to be driving to Portland. So that's about 3 hours from where I live. So I was going to be on the road. And for me, when I come up against some kind of what people would call writer's block, all it takes for me is usually getting in the car and taking a long drive. And while I'm driving, my mind is
going crazy.
I don't want to scare anybody on the road here, but my mind's out of sync with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So on the drive down to Portland, and then 2 days later on the drive back, I had pretty much fleshed out this story from where I had left it with the short story all the way to that last scene and what I wanted to accomplish with that last scene. Now that might change as I write, but there I am driving and I'm still thinking. So yeah, sitting in a chair and doing it off the cuff doesn't work well for me. I usually need to know why I'm sitting in the chair before I'll sit in it and begin writing. Obviously,
if I sit in a chair and try to think about something, I usually fall asleep. I take a nap, and then maybe something will come of that.
You need a less comfy chair.
You can't force feed your thoughts into your brain and produce something. I think that's very difficult to do. You can consider possibilities, but by and large, most of the things that really work well, for me at least, happen spontaneously and sometimes without even being asked to happen. They just suddenly appear, and there's the answer to something, and you go from there. It's very random.
Right.
I just think that is kind of the way you learn to, after a while. You know, my previous life as a lawyer did not teach me to think that way. That's not how lawyers think, for the most part.
Right.
Well, you know, some do, I suppose, but this business requires you to be more spontaneous and to be open to anything that comes into your head as a potential useful tool. And sometimes I get sick. That's difficult and distractive.
Right. Yeah. The where you can take a story. Sometimes there's too many avenues. I wrote my 500 word. I try to write 500 words at least a day. Sometimes I write 2,000. Sometimes I only write 300. So it just depends on the day. But as an example here, you know, that dreaded word that you and I both don't like, research.
Yes, research.
I'm having to, I have a giant water fountain with kind of a Trevi fountain Italian thing going on with this fountain in this story I'm writing. And the fountain has to have a secret compartment in it. Well, can you do that with marble? Is that something you can do with marble? Is that it? Did the Romans do that? You know, are there any examples of this anywhere? No, of course not. I've done tons of searches online. I can't find a single one. So do I scrap this idea or do I just do it? That's the stuff that slows me down when I'm writing, is these little tiny things that I have to figure out on my own.
Yeah, I think that sealers were invented, you know, later in life when politics started to become more intense. All right, well, I lost my next question.
Oh, that's okay. I got another one from
Take
Caitlin
one
Ray.
from the audience while I regroup here on my last question. And that's the story for tonight.
Oh, that's fine. Okay.
No,
ask,
I think, you know, knowing the books that you've written and the compendiums you've put together and all of this, do you actually have a sense of strategy for the long term for what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, or do you just respond to the moment? This is what I feel like doing right now. This is what I'm going to do.
yeah, well, it depends, I guess. If it comes to like Grim Oak Press, I'm looking into the future there. We have some major projects that we haven't announced, that we signed contracts for, but these things have to be laid out in a way that makes sense so we don't burden people with this influx of awesomeness, for lack of a better way to put it. And you know, so I have to be very careful with how we do that, and with printing and binding delays happening all over the industry.
Yeah.
You know, there are considerations that I have to make when it comes to that kind of stuff. When it comes to writing and what I plan on doing, I have a loose idea of what I want to do at any given moment, but kind of like yourself, you know, you'll say, you know, I'm really interested in writing this, and then I think what's going to come next is going to be these two books, and then you get done with the first book and you're like, you know what, I don't want to write that next book, I'm going to write something different. And so I don't look too far ahead when it comes to the writing piece. I definitely finish what I start. I think that's, at least for me so far, is important. You know, young writers, and I include myself in that group, even though I'm 46, I haven't been writing that long. And it'd be really easy to get distracted and go squirrel and go do something that's a great idea that I just had, right? Like, it'd be very easy to do that. I try very hard to stay on focus and stay on target with what I'm working on.
Yeah. There's a continuity issue.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And then, you know, the anthologies are just fun, pure fun to me. I really enjoy putting an anthology together and seeing who turns in stories and all of that. Like Unbound 2 right now has a June release, and it has a really good lineup of people. I'm reading the stories right now. That's what I'm reading at night, actually, right now, is when I go to bed, is I'm doing my first pass on these stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a lot of fun. But yeah, I don't look too far out in the future because one, I have little kids, so you know, they only care about their next snack. And I kind of follow that pattern too.
Intensely, yes.
I'm going on my first vacation though in a couple weeks, and I'm actually really looking forward to it. And I do plan on writing during it.
Yeah,
I think it'll be
do
fun.
too.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I talk all the time about how if you don't write for any length of time, you know, 2 weeks, a month, it really throws me off my track.
Yes.
And I have trouble getting back into it because it's a process that you have to work yourself into and then stay grafted to a certain extent in order to get your work done. Otherwise, it's too easy to drift away because you don't have that built-in stick-to-itiveness that you're supposed to have in order to get this job done.
Right.
I've had some time, well, I've recently had, as you know, a major breakdown for about 2 months where I lost everything. And that really threw me off. And I think you're trying to avoid that, but one of the ways that you don't avoid it is by saying, oh, well, I'll just take a month off and then I'll go from there and it'll be all right. Well, no, it won't.
It won't. Yeah. I ran into this. I ran into the same thing kind of almost at the same time you did a little bit, because I was putting together the partnership with Patrick Rothfuss. And so for those of you who are watching and listening who don't know, Patrick and I formed a partnership. We formed an imprint under Grim Oak Press so that he can produce some books that are out of print that he thinks shouldn't be out of print. He wants to do some of his own special editions that he thinks deserves it, as well as some of his own work. He has a graphic novel set in his Four Corners world that he really wants to publish. And so we're doing some fun things with that. But you know, when you put together something like that, you got all the legal stuff that goes along with that, and the numerous meetings and the emails back and forth. And I didn't really write a word from, I'd say, from Halloween last year all the way till almost Christmas.
Ooh.
And as those days went on during those months, and my wife would be, if she was here, she'd be nodding her head vigorously. As the days wore on, I was just becoming more insufferable by the day, even more than I usually am.
Oh my God.
I know, it's hard to believe, right? And all of a sudden, like at the very beginning of this month, I went, okay, so that's done, that's wrapped up. We've done the announcement, the press release is out there. We have our first project that's already going off the ground. This is going great. Everybody's doing their job. I can relax now, and I can actually get back to what I love doing, which is writing. And so I've been a joy. My wife would tell you I've been a joy for the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks compared to you know, last month or the month before.
That's very good news for many of us.
Yes.
We were concerned about you going off the rails. So we could let go of that.
Right.
So are you following all the different social media that it's out there, and the different forms of entertainment, and are you putting your finger on any pulse that is particularly strong right now?
That's a really good question. I actually had this conversation with, who was it? I can't remember. It might have been Peter Arulian the other day, talking about trends that are happening and that have been happening. And when the Dune movie was announced several years ago, I had this kind of sneaking suspicion that science fiction might get a bump here when it comes to readers, when it comes to new work. Fantasy, you know, has been this, to use the words like you use, and the 800-pound gorilla, you know, ever since the mid-90s. And then when Harry Potter happened, it just really took off then. And I was thinking to myself, we've had a fair amount of fantasy adaptations in the years since then, since Lord of the Rings came out and all that. But maybe science fiction is going to get its due coming up. And so we have Dune, and it was actually a very good movie. And we have The Expanse, which by James S.A. Corey, which just wrapped up and was wrapped up very nicely. And
Andy Weir's book.
And then, yeah, you have The Martian, which was super important, right? And The Foundation on Apple TV, which is absolutely beautiful. I haven't watched it yet because my wife and I are waiting through all these TV shows that we're trying to catch up on. But so I was thinking to myself, this science fiction, this is kind of this burgeoning thing again. This could be really, really good. And Antiquity, I had been writing that already, so I felt very comfortable about releasing Antiquity into the world of fantasy, because I felt like, well, there's going to be enough Dune people interested that might see some Dune. And some of the reviewers have talked about, you know, the Dune influence in Antiquity. It's not the prose. I don't write like Frank at all, but just some of the ideas there, you know, ecology and the philosophy of some of this stuff I really liked. So yeah, there's a trend there. Then you have Martha Wells, who's doing this amazing work with Murderbot in these novellas, and
a lot of people love that series.
They're hilarious and they're great and they're touching, and it's science fiction. And you have John Scalzi, who now has kind of done very different things over the last 10 years. And so yeah, there's this kind of this renaissance for science fiction, I think.
Yes,
science fiction that's driven by character, as opposed to back in the 50s and 60s, when it was like the big idea that drove the book.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say that's a trend for sure. And I think that'll continue.
Well, I am distressed by the fact that we both are struggling with children and various other relatives who think that gaming is the big new thing.
Oh, yeah.
And, I lock them out of the house if they talk about that too much, and tell them they can come back in when they have sanity returned. But that's out there, and it's a huge industry, and it's making a lot of money for the people who are involved in it, at least on the production end. And they're I don't know if they're actually you know, we've had movies made from video games, which I've always found very strange. But what the heck?
I know that, you know, that Microsoft, when it come to Xbox, they were hiring, and Bungie, they were hiring science fiction writers. Like Eric Nyland was one of the people they hired to help build their story and their world and all that stuff. I'm kind of seeing it now too in Hollywood, where, you know, when it comes to The Expanse, you know, Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham, they're James S.A. Corey, and they did the writing on the scripts. I think they were in the script rooms, and they were the principal script writers for those. And in even something that's in my own life right now, there's this thing that's going on with me with a possible work where they want a fantasy writer, they want a writer, they want a storyteller. And I have a feeling, I'm hoping that Hollywood starts realizing that with a lot of us, that we do this for a living and we know what we're doing in the genre, as opposed to hiring somebody outside the genre who doesn't really know it. So that's a trend too that I see possibly continuing on, which would be nice.
It would be good if they used real writers. That's always been a problem with Hollywood, is that it's been governed so much by committee and by a whole bunch of people on those committees who haven't the foggiest idea about how to write a story in a logical way, or how to develop a story or characters, either one. Hence all the movies that we look at and shake our heads in dismay.
Right.
But there may be a movement away, and especially if they're going to start looking again at books, because there's so many out there and so many possibilities. Some really, really good stories being done in both adult and young adult. And I think that we're going to see a little bit more of that happen. There's an obvious market for it, and it can't all be Marvel Comics. So it's time for a few other things to get involved too.
Yeah, Peter Dinklage today said, you know, of Game of Thrones fame, he said over the weekend, I think, that he didn't understand why HBO kept going back to the well. When it came to, and not just HBO, but other people too. You know, why is there another Lord of the Rings coming out? You know, I understand it's a different time period and all that. Why is there a spinoff for Game of Thrones? Well, it's what Hollywood knows will sell for sure. But I posted on the Variety, the Facebook Variety page today about that. And I said, why, I agree with Peter 150%. Why don't they start looking at some of these other stories, you know, that that are just as good and haven't been given the treatment yet? Let's introduce some people. But, you know, you can't tell Hollywood what to do. You know that better than anybody. So.
Most of it says, I think a lot of it's just impulse, and impulse governed by, this is a hot idea. This is the idea of the moment. Nobody's done this before. I'm going to do this. It eschews so much of what's out there. There's a lack of knowledge about it to a great extent. And I think that works against the successes that have happened in science fiction, fantasy, and maybe some of that will start to change now that we have such a broad plane to work from.
All right.
I don't know.
Let's see. There's a couple questions here. Let's get to one. We only got like 20 minutes left. So
yeah, 20 minutes.
Let's see here. Caitlin Ray. When you are going through those moments where you hate your writing and want to throw it away, how do you push through and keep working with an idea?
And why are you asking me?
I'm asking you.
You're supposed to answer these questions.
I never have those problems, Terry.
Well, if you have that attitude, maybe you better take a real close look at what you've decided to do and see if it still holds up. Sometimes that's your inner self saying, this is a dumb idea and you are being stupid to pursue this. Perhaps you should think about going in a different direction. Even in a small sense of, you know, a chapter here and there, or something that it doesn't govern an entire piece of writing. But I think you should always be questioning yourself about what you're doing.
Right.
And you should be wanting to be sure that what you're doing is in sync with what you think you are doing, if that makes any sense at all. But sometimes you can get, you can go off track pretty easy and just assume that you are doing what you're supposed to be, but you're actually wandered off into the Sahara somewhere.
Yeah, totally agree with all of that. You never, if you're not questioning yourself while you're writing, you're not doing your job right. But you can't be debilitated by it. Sometimes you just need to step away and think about something and just see where you're going and see if that's the cause of it, or, maybe you're getting tired of it. You need to just take a step away, go for a walk. You come back to it and you're fine. That's what happens with me sometimes. I also like to take a walk sometimes, and that'll figure out what's going on with whatever I'm working on.
think it's virtually required that you second guess yourself on these things all the time. And you don't have to go crazy about it, but you do have to be careful. And I just had this happen to me, which hasn't happened in a major way for a long time, but it happened this time. And I threw out one book entirely by mistake, which was crushing. And then on top of that, I lost faith in what I was doing, and I just had to walk away from it for a while because it was clear that I was having a major break apart with this thing, and I didn't know exactly what it was going to take to fix it. And these things happen, and that's part of what a writer's life is about. And you can't always just sail down the river from end to end with no problems along the way.
Yeah, I wish what we did was a 9-to-5 job. The 9-to-5ers out there would have a better appreciation maybe for what we do, or maybe they need to see how we do it and how half of our job is floundering around thinking,
Floundering around is good, right?
Yeah.
I just want to say, Shawn, that one thing I was thinking about, you're talking about the films that are coming out, but the wave I saw come out most recently was a bunch of YA book adaptations, some science fiction, some fantasy. But what I thought was the biggest problem right now of them is that they take the book and the series and what is the unique ideas of the story, they homogenize it all down, so it's just another generic SF fantasy film. And that's why all these things were pretty bad movies, not just the actual casting or plotting, but they take the unique individual aspects of most of the stories. You end up with it's another same old guy goes off chasing a dragon, and they take out the unique characters or what made the world be different. Or I remember the Darkest Rising, they decided who would care about an English kid? We'll make the kid an American kid. That was the first starting point of their change. We'll take the Darkest Rising, we'll call it The Seeker, because that, we should throw away an award-winning title of a book. And that was when I was a kid. Terry, remember this, there was like one science fiction show on TV at a time. They're mostly really bad. And the one that always resonates with me was when Logan's Run came out. It wasn't a perfect film, but it was a really cool movie. And they announced Logan's Run, the TV series. And then they announced the people who are going to be the executive producers, the showrunners, were the guys best known for creating Charlie's Angels. It wasn't a great TV show, and they didn't understand science fiction. So I'm glad that at least we've gotten past some of that point. So maybe one of these days we'll see another product of Terry's or Shawn's up on the big screen.
Yeah, we still have hope.
Could you talk a little more about Shawn? Could you talk a little more about Grim Oak Press for the guys that don't know that?
Sure. Yeah. So Grim Oak Press, it's my publishing house. It is, let's see, this will be the 10th year. Actually, this is the 10-year anniversary of Grim Oak Press existing. And the reason it exists at all is because I was diagnosed with cancer in 2011. And I was one of those unfortunate people who had a pre-existing condition who couldn't get health insurance. And then I got cancer. So I racked up this debt that was over $200,000. I had debt collectors calling me while I'm going through treatment. It was just a terrible situation. And I actually asked Terry if he would donate a short story to me that I could use to sell online to kind of offset, get these bill collectors, at least stop the phone calls every 3 times a day kind of thing. And Terry said, I'm more than happy to do that, but why don't you reach out to some of your other friends that are writers too? And light bulb, that's how that came to be. And I actually wrote, Mr. Rothfuss was the second person I wrote. He said yes. And then right after that was just this kind of snowball effect of wonderful writers helping me in my time of need. And that became the anthology Unfettered. And the sales from Unfettered helped almost alleviate that $208,000, I think that's what it was, $1,000, almost in its entirety. The Dark Thorn, I published a Dark Thorn right before it to teach myself how to do a book, and that took care of the other about 30,000 or so. But so anyway, so it was very good. It was a great situation. It was proof positive of the science fiction community and how we can rally together for what I considered a good cause at the time. There's multiple good causes out there now, which is nice. But And then, and I was happy, you know, my debt was gone. I didn't have to declare medical bankruptcy that would, you know, ruin my financial life for a good solid 10 years or so. And it did its job. And then I saw Brandon Sanderson. Brandon and I have been friends a really, really long time. And I saw him and he said, well, when's Unfettered 2 coming? And I'm like, no, Brandon, I don't need any more money for my debt. That's gone. And he's like, Shawn, you've been given a good platform here. You can do a lot of good with this if you really want to. And so along comes Unfettered 2. And then so during that time, I was like, well, if I'm going to do anthologies here, I might as well make some of these books that I grew up reading that I loved. I might as well do nice specialty editions of them. And so that's Grim Oak. For the last 10 years, that's what we've done. And it's been a crazy ride, especially at the beginning. Terry has generously offered signing thousands and thousands and thousands of signature pages for the specialty books that we've done for the Shannara series. And actually we have Scions of Shannara that's at the press right now. So fingers crossed that comes in here soon, here in the next month or two. But yeah, so that's Grim Oak Press, and it's, you know, you can find out more at grimoakpress.com.
Well, since we're doing that, we got a question now that a person you might remember wants to know, if you had the choice, would you rather write full-time or run Grim Oak full-time? I think I know the answer.
Oh, Patrick Swenson.
We don't know this guy at all.
How dare you, Patrick? So Patrick actually has had a short story in one of my anthologies. He's a very good writer. So I highly recommend you go seek out his books. And to answer your question, Patrick, that is a tough one. God, I'm so intertwined with everything I do now. I don't know if I'd be a fully functional human being if I didn't do everything that I'm doing right now. But I probably would be a writer. If I could make, you know, a living at writing, which I am right now, I could very easily, you know, turn the signed page in Grim Oak away. And I think I would be able to support my family and live a good life. That would be fun. I have been a writer since I was 6-7 years old, a natural born liar. My mom always told me, you're going to be a lawyer, a politician, or a fiction writer. So I didn't want to do the other two. Terry convinced me to stay away from one. And lately he convinced me to stay away from one. So there's only one left.
So you're going to be a politician?
So maybe a politician. Yeah. No, my wife said she'd divorce me if I ever went down that road.
Quick question though. Someone wants to know about submissions for Unbounded, if it's closed, and if not, how do they enter?
Yeah, so Unbound is invitation. All my anthologies are invitation only, although I have been mulling the idea of producing an anthology with a couple best-selling names, but then opening it up to submissions. I'm considering it. It's actually something I've considered for, I'd say, the last year or so. And I think after I finish Unbound 3, I'm going to look towards that next anthology. I'm going to do something kind of fun there. I'll do half published writers that are published traditionally and do half through submissions. And, you know, I might learn a harsh lesson there, but I think it might be really fun too. So that's a very good question to ask.
We're going to run out of time, but anyone wants to ask a question, you should put it in the box now. I'm going to ask this other one. You guys are going to love this one if you've seen it, Shawn. They want to know if you have any tips, tricks, or advice on expanding ideas when writing. She said, for example, when I write, I tell the story too quickly and it needs to be expanded. What are your methods to pull more out? Good luck with that.
I'll start with that one. Terry will definitely have ideas about that. A story, you know, a story is what the story is. And if you're trying to force words into it to reach a word count or a page length or a, you know, going from a novella to a novel, you know, trying to make that jump, that can be really tricky sometimes because you could be throwing just a lot of extra stuff in there that's not necessary. Oh boy, that's a tough question. What do you think about that, Terry?
I think you need to slow down, number one, and give more time to considering what it is that you're trying to do and how you're going to go about it. But I also think it's part of the process, and it's not as if there's any single one way to do this.
Right.
Rewrites are important. doing rewrites are very important, and giving them your attention and looking for the things that feel like they're scant or feel like they're not fully fleshed out. When you're doing your reading, then that's when you jump in and you add the things that perhaps need to be put in. And sometimes you do, pages that need to be there, not just a paragraph here or there. And it's a lot to do. It's a lot of what defines the writer. Look at somebody like Elmore Leonard, who looked like, his books were edited down to the bones, which I think to a large extent they were, versus somebody like James Lee Burke, who is all over the place with his descriptions and his emotive moments. And it really depends on the writer and what you're comfortable with. You need to find that spot where you belong, where you feel comfortable with what you're doing. And if you do that, the writing becomes easier. And also, I think you tend to flesh out. You need to you find, better where it is you need to expand and contract and improve the whole story.
I tend to overwrite. And by that, I just mean I throw too many words into my paragraphs or into dialogue. And usually when I start my writing day in the morning, I will read what I wrote the day before, and invariably I end up chopping out 10 to 20% of what I've done the previous day. And that's just my process. Everybody's process is different, I think. So finding that, like you said, finding that medium where you feel good about what you're doing is the most important thing.
I had an editor in the early days who taught me a lot about that. And his approach to this was periodically he would say, too many adjectives, cut back, or too much exposition about weather or something. And the point was that I was, propounding in ways that were not acceptable. And I was taking the story off the trail just so I could prove the wonderfulness of my own writing. And that's a very bad idea. What you want is the story to move and move all the time. That's the kind of thing we do. So you can do that. And the other thing is that the longer I write, the less I want to write more words. I find that I feel like now, if I add those extra words that I would have added before without even thinking about it, that I feel like I'm expounding to the point of ridiculousness, and I need to cut those words out. You don't need those words. One adjective is sufficient, that sort of thing. And it makes you a better writer right away. Or maybe it's just a sense of that now I feel like less is more than rather than how I used to think. No, not necessarily.
I'm getting better at that. When I write a sentence, I'm like, oh, you know what? I don't need that word. I don't need that. And,
right.
And it's a stronger sentence. It reads faster, and that's the point. So
yes,
you and I write very. I definitely am Brooksian when it comes to the cliffhanger at the end of a chapter, that kind of thing. And
right.
You can do that with a sentence in the middle. You can do the same thing almost. So
yes,
there was one question in here that I see Joy asked a question in the box over here. What program format do you use? Word, Scrivener, Final Draft?
I use Word.
Yeah, I use Word as well. I have a lot of colleagues or a lot of friends of mine who are writers that use Scrivener, and they swear by it to keep their story organized. But yeah, I'm a Word guy. I hate to say this, but I think I'm too old to learn something new like that. and it works for me.
When you get familiar enough with a style or program, you don't want to change it.
Right.
Unless you find something really wonderful. And because you're familiar with this, it's like you're with an old friend. And when you go into it, you know right away where you're going and how to get there and what all the nuances are of that. And I think that's probably the most reason that we use what we use. I've been using Word since I don't know, shortly after the birth of Christ. So I'm not going to now change over and try something else. I just feel like I'm too set in my ways for that to make any sense.
Yeah, and I use Word too because it's what I know. So yeah.
I want to thank Shawn for picking up one thing from Terry, which is not writing a 1,000-page novel, because much as some of the guys I know can write a wonderful 800, 900-page book, they don't all need to be that. And Shawn, I was looking at your book thinking, hey, it's only 300 and something pages. All right, you know. And I was really happy to see her work with Beth Mitchell, one of the people I've always thought was one of the best editors in the business, and certainly a very good judge of talent. And one of the people who I feel, I haven't actually seen her direct notes to people, knows when to tell an author, you know, cut this out. She doesn't have any problem laying the iron down, even if she's nice about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, she's wonderful that way.
Any last minute thing you want to say, Terry? We're going to run out of time here.
No, you know, I'm doing Daughter of Darkness, which is a sequel to Child of Light in October of this year. I'll be probably dropping down to the U-Book store or doing another Zoom or whatever. You know,
hopefully we'll be hosting a live event sometime soon, I promise. I've been trying.
Yeah, I know. It seems weird not to be doing it anymore.
For 6 months, I keep getting pushed. Yeah, I've been pushed into Zoom again. I was going to do all these things this fall, and like with Shawn's case, the book didn't get published. A couple of people I know their book just didn't get printed on time. Then when they were printed, I couldn't bring people in the store. Right now, all we're allowed to do is have a few signing lines of people that come in and get a book sign leave, and they pushed it back again to at least March. We're still waiting to see what happens with Omi. But
well,
hopefully,
the trouble is that you know, the signing thing is fine, and people want signed copies of books, and so this gives them a chance to get that. But going to a book signing is supposed to be an event.
yeah,
And an event requires some interaction between the author and the audience. And I really find that that's the part I enjoy the most from my perspective. And I really miss having that connection established with an audience and its various members and exchanging ideas.
it's one of the things where, you know, Terry brings entire families along to see him, you know, and that's one of the things I love seeing. I'm waiting for someone to bring their great grandkid or something, that when the first person started reading the book, and we're getting to that point close, I think. Shawn, thank you very much. Remember, Shawn is going to come in and sign books in a couple of days. So if you want to order a signed book, now would be the time.
Yeah, I mean, I sweetened that deal too, just because I'm a nice guy. I decided to, I'm going to bring some signed page, 25% off coupons for the signed page to you books. So anybody who buys basically a book from this event, you'll get that coupon. So it'll save you a little money on my site as well.
Can you mail me mine?
Your check will be in the mail for this, sir.
So I think any book Terry wants, you would just send him a copy.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
thank you, everyone.
Good fun. Nice going, Shawn. And that's a very good book. Antiquity Gray is a fine piece of work and here to be commended.
I'm always fond of a good mech story anyway. And it was a fun character. I like to watch it. Thanks for coming and attending. Hopefully we'll all see you soon, maybe in person. Have a good night.
Bye.